Just answering questions with waptek. 2 questions or statements from one person. I find it funny the panic being created over 6 inches of snow. Actually, it's a foot. When I was a child, we regularly had 4-foot snowfalls and we didn't go to pieces over it. The part you're ignoring, I actually stated. Regularly. In Portland, Oregon, when we had over 1 foot of snow, the 1 foot mark is actually the upper limit for being able to bicycle through it independently. That caused downed trees, electrical problems, fires. The camping area I was in, because I'm homeless at the time, was made deadly. And I was not able to mechanically find a place to set up my tent. I tried not to impose on a friend. I had no choice. It also meant that the city shut down because it doesn't happen regularly. We get what we call century snows. They actually happen once every 10 years at this rate. If you're not aware of it, it's about every 10 years. City of Portland, Oregon gets over 1 foot of snow. Now, that's the upper limit for most people's cars being able to not bottom out in the snow. Doesn't matter if you have chains. So the first group of people who hits it, if it happens at night or late in the day, is that the roads become clogged no matter what, because compaction rate for snow means that they do not have the ability to clear the snow off. And in order to clear the snow off, you have to have been able to set your depths correctly and go through and remove the snow correctly. If you skim the snow off, you'll make a big, soft, smushy surface that people still can't drive on very easily, but it's less damaging. But again, regularly, over a certain depth, the snowplows have to have a different design in order to clear the snow off efficiently. Otherwise, they're not able to do it. Instead of just driving through at a shit pace where you're honking your horn, they're stuck. Next, very importantly, that means that all other people are unable to get where they need to go. Again, if it happens late in the day or at night especially, there are no services to fix things because they can't get to the equipment because they're at home. We regularly had 4 feet of snow, and therefore you had regularly people who were stationed near where the equipment was, or had to take it home, or had to drive it to work in order to get to work. You had people who were prepared for it and had experienced it regularly. If it happens 10 years apart or 100 years apart in some areas, they're not able to compensate for it. Saying 6 inches of snow when it was actually 2 feet is an example of a person who is now couching their statements, and that's silly. Falling to pieces over it. So, if you're in an area that has this on a regular basis, I assume you didn't grow up where I did, where we had droughts on a regular basis. We had fires on a regular basis and droughts. We had also occurrences of carrion eaters that would attack people. We had to deal with very different conditions than you do. We would store water sources in irrigation ditches and in the water system in the area. And we had to use high-efficiency watering systems. You may see in eastern Oregon, if you look at a satellite view or airplane view actually, round fields because they use really low-to-the-ground spray hoses. I'm sure in your country, where you have regular snowfalls of 4 feet deep, Germany, yeah, I'm sure that you implement exactly those systems to compensate for the inevitable drought and death toll. No? Where I grew up, we also had 3 feet snowfalls where I grew up. Once every 8 years, so it's about the same timing. We weren't able to compensate for it either. But then again, it's ranch land. Horses work. Horses have a draft distance. Height clearance. It's a little higher than your average pickup truck or even monster truck. Also, if you got a ranch, you can just turn loose the cows on the road. Moo, moo, moo. And they go through and they trample it down. Anyway. But yeah, we fall to pieces because you're better than us somehow. Because, I'd love to see how you'd behave in the desert. So anyway, here we go. Next. The same person. I think it's common sense to realize wearing a mask is counterproductive to human health. There's never been anybody who's ever proven that in a study or even indicated it, and the only people saying that are cunts like you. I don't care. That's the end of it. Now, I tried to present your first one here because it's a typical thing. If you don't experience such and such, then you don't know. But at this point, we're talking about ignoring over 100 years of experience trying to prevent disease transfer and people wearing masks for painting walls and sweeping the garage. Masks are counterproductive to human health. No, you're full of shit. You're a cunt. That's it. That's the entire video, I guess. I was going to do a video today on politicians misusing gun control arguments. I think I'll do a mini version now, not looking at my notes. Many studies have been put out. Let's make this a useful subject in the video. Sorry, it's in the last part of it. What things actually affect gun violence and what things actually affect mass shootings? First of all, in the United States and many other countries, criminals shooting each other is ignored, even though that's part of mass shootings and gun violence in general. Also, specifically other countries and in the United States in the past, mass killings of people for ethnic cleansing is ignored. But what was the most effective weapon in the 1800s to murder a bunch of Native Americans? Gatling gun. What was the second most? There wasn't. Just large numbers of people shooting. And the will to murder, because people decided that having a skin color meant you weren't a human. What's the most common form of gun violence? Suicide. By 2 to 1. Period, full stop. Even in war, suicide, depending on the war, is a more common reason people die. Assault weapons bans. They are about military-style characteristics that indicate, central conceit, that you have a gun that's been stripped down to the bare minimum to be a practical, minimalistic design that would be used in the military. Number one. Those are the characteristics, the ones that are functional. Non-functional, superficial characteristics. It looks like you're trying to make it look like a gun. I think that indicates you wanted to go Rambo. Next one, not spoken. If you're attracted to the gun you had to have in the military, maybe you have post-traumatic stress syndrome and we shouldn't trust you with a gun. I know that sounds like a really offbeat statement, but that's literally listed in some of the reasonings people were talking about, but they didn't include it in the gun laws. Next, you're a wannabe. You shouldn't be allowed to have a gun that's used by that group. Just like dressing up like a cop, but not quite, Patty Mayo, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. And then next thing is that if you're not aware of it, in the military, the gun that people are carrying is primarily a defensive weapon and offensive weapon. It's primarily both. It has to do both. A defensive-only weapon or offensive-only weapon isn't useful. Which means if you're a hunter, having a weapon that would be used for offense would be the type. If you're shooting targets, you want a high-accuracy gun. Well, shooting people at range is very important. And not having to have a scope or anything else, just have it bare bones still work for that. Military-style weapons are better for target shooting, and again, for offense, for shooting a deer. That would be the civilian version of it. What about defense? Obviously, if you can shoot a deer and accurately shoot something at a longer range, maybe, to within the limits of the gun. In fact, the gun exceeds your ability or matches it without using a scope. Obviously, it would be useful for defense. It has to do both. It can't just be an offensive weapon. Artillery and machine guns are defined as offensive weapons. They're only treated defensively for another effect. Primary function is offense, for attack. At least that's how it was defined in a couple of military manuals I decided to consult. So what are the characteristics of the gun that make it actually useful? it does boil down to some characteristics. It should be pointed out that, like the AR-15, it's not good for very long range. Sniper rifle, it is not, but it can be used almost up to that range. It's a generalized utility weapon. And again, same thing for taking out rabid animals or animal control or pest control. With the exception of shooting something small, like a tree-occupying bird, the bullet may go through them and hit somebody else. We're talking about a gun that can do almost everything. It's not as versatile as a shotgun, which can do a lot of these as well. Also, I should point out that its max range matches nearly the max range of pistol and shotguns, which are always considered inadequate to rifles. So you take a rifle and pare down the weight and pare down its functionality to rifle and shotgun max ranges. That's kind of the way it is. Competition grade pistols for target shooting. So it's really good for target shooting. Hunting. It becomes you only need one gun. If I could only have one gun, what would it be? If you were literally told you can only own one gun in the United States and then a secondary. Before it'd be a rifle, shotgun, or pistol, and with me it would have been a shotgun and a pistol, not a rifle. For me it would be self-defense and maybe short range. Rifle, long range, and then the person would pick a shotgun or a pistol. Some people would pick a pistol only. But the AR-15 has that peculiarity of having not shotgun-rated capability, but it's getting close to all of them. And if you pick weird rounds, yeah, you can use on-purpose underpowered cartridges that just barely cycle the action, or even not cycle it. People pick those because then you can shoot a bird out of a tree and not worry about hitting anything downrange. They'll use wooden bullets or plastic ones so that it really high velocity, but it stops flying 80 feet downrange. Some people even convert them over to 22 long rifle. And because it's a split upper receiver, you can go from 12 gauge down to 22 by changing out something. If you use pop pins, which everybody should do, you can make an almost universal gun. The more I learn about it, the more I realize it's an attempt that succeeded in making an all-around, almost useful for everything kind of gun. And because it encompasses the max ranges and capabilities for shotgun and pistol, not really. Someone's going to correct me, but it kind of does. You end up with it being almost a perfect gun. But people don't like it because it doesn't look Elmer Fudd old school. And that's when we get the superficial characteristics. Now we get to the getting around the bans and rules. Again, we're going to talk about the magazine capacity in a minute, but many states, because they don't want to be seen as banning a component, because that's crossing a line, they'll say you can have that component if you get rid of all these other characteristics. So people decide what the priority is. Again, if you had to pick one gun, I would pick a shotgun. Some people it would be a pistol, some people it would be a rifle. But if you had to pick one characteristic to keep, not remove, keep, in an AR-15, it would be a detachable high-capacity magazine. It can go from 100 rounds down to 5. The 5 being you make it look really Elmer Fuddish, and you have a small magazine that just chucks in there in the port, and it looks like an old-school gun. In fact, a lot of people will reshape it to where it blends it in, to where it doesn't become conspicuous until you put the magazine in. And then they keep really short magazines, a bunch of them, and then one big one or a couple of them. Now, I want to bring up a couple of points about that. If you offer people what is the priority you want for your rifle, they'll just buy a completely different gun if they have to. Or they'll buy a pistol because the pistol doesn't have this restriction. Yeah. Or they'll buy a rifle that doesn't, it's just not an AR-15 because the bans were specific. So what happens is you don't have a way of getting rid of all of the characteristics because you'd have to outlaw all of them. And that's against the rules in some legal systems in some states. So California people sometimes have really high capacity magazines. Now let's get to the magazine purpose. The answer. The reason for the magazine large capacity ban isn't the number of bullets. It's the number of times you have a break in the shooting so you can get away from the attacker. That's what all of them agree on, and they never say it. It's not the number of bullets in the magazine, which you can use as storage, by the way, I should point out. It's that you have a break in the fire so you can get away from your attacker. That's actually become a significant component. All the other ones don't work. Background checks don't work either. Paddock would have passed it. Red flag laws, the same thing. He would have passed it. Breaking any law. He didn't get caught trying to buy a full auto conversion. So does this magazine, high capacity magazine ban have an effect? You decide. Post below. Thanks for watching. Good day. Good luck.